Thank you all for joining Arctic IT today for the GP Roadmap webinar. We're excited to have pre-sales solution architect Matt Borkowski presenting for us today. So with that, let us welcome Matt.
All right, well, thank you, Brooke. It's a pleasure to be here today and to chat with you all about Dynamics GP and the direction that Microsoft is taking with it. I've been using GP, consulting with it and everything for almost 14 years now, so it's a big part of my career and excited to talk to you about that. So I wanted to say hello, and again, thank you all for coming today. And with that, I will dive right in. So when we talk about Dynamics GP, got to talk about the options we have now in the future of where Microsoft is heading. But before that, I want to talk about why we are the right partner to chat with you about Dynamics GP. We are an experienced solution provider. And I know a number of you joining us today are our existing customers, so we thank you for that. Thank you for making us a successful Microsoft partner. And what we bring as a partner, as a teammate to the organization, is a stability of our organization, our ability to execute well on all of our projects and support, and to be a long-term strong teammate with all of our customers. And part of that stability comes from our proud heritage of being part of the DOI Unlimited Alaska Native Corporation. So behind Arctic IT is a large Alaska Native corporation that allows us financial stability, phenomenal corporate leadership is pictured here from our board and council members, and we're very proud to be part of the DOI Unlimited Alaska Native Corporation. Part of that stability also comes from our partnership with Microsoft. We are a Microsoft Gold partner and have been so for over 15 years, and only 1% of Microsoft partners are able to maintain the Microsoft Gold status. So we are very proud of that. There's a lot of key requirements that we have to maintain as an organization across all these competencies here, as well as our staff remaining on top and certified in all these, so we can deliver consistently on the very solid Microsoft platform. And this isn't our first rodeo. We've climbed this mountain many times, many times with those of you on this call today. We've been able to maintain and demonstrate key competencies across every major component of Dynamics 365, which we'll be talking some about today, Dynamics GP, the broad spectrum of Microsoft Dynamics in general, Office 365, and all of really the Microsoft cloud infrastructure, which is the way of the future for Microsoft, and part of what we'll be talking about today. So we have deployed and helped people move to the cloud on Dynamics and other areas for government, commercial, and tribal customers. And we are very proud of our clientele. And as this has been a great part of our casino webinar series, just highlight three great customers of ours who frequently say very good things about us here. And we've been very happy to have them and other customers of ours and continue to do so. Now that we've established who we are and why we are the right folks to be talking to about GP and the way forward, just kind of want to start to get a sense of how the attendees feel right now about Dynamics GP. So we'll be posting a poll with the question of, how confident do you feel in Dynamics GP's ongoing ability to meet your business needs? So on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being low, 5 being high, how confident do you feel about GP's ability to meet your ongoing business needs and changing business needs going forward?
Okay, and it looks like they're just finishing up. Okay, and I'm going to share the results. We have 10% at a 2, 50% at 3, 30% at 4, and 10% at 5.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for taking the time to submit that poll question, and it just kind of helps us get a feel for how people currently feel about this solution. That's great. Thank you. All right. So when we talk about Dynamics GP, one of the best places to start is taking a look at the current Dynamics GP roadmap. So this is published by Microsoft, and they present this annually at some of their user groups. And this is showing just kind of the history of where things have been over the last couple of years and where Microsoft is going with this for the next couple of years. So in 2016, we had GP 2016 that had released earlier that year. And they really spent a lot of time focusing on trying to improve and build on and actually create this web client usage. So we see a lot of things involved in that was trying to create the ability to access the system via web client and use some of the more modern reporting tools that we see there of Power BI. That didn't go quite as well as they had hoped, so they continued to evolve that with GP 2016 R2, including some top features requested by customers. Most of those just little enhancements, a couple of new reports and inquiries and things like that. In 2017, we had our first version of GP 2018 that was released near the end of 2017. And with that, they included Workflow 4.0. And Workflow 4.0 was just some additional potential workflows you could enable for your general ledger entries, a lot of HR and payroll self-service type features that they really tried to roll out, and some enhancements to document attachment and the ability to hook up to the Power Suite, as they're called, which we'll talk a little bit more about later, but to try to be able to connect to some of the additional tools that Microsoft was making available through their Dynamics 365 and Office 365 cloud options with the on-premise Dynamics GP. They continued to enhance on that a little bit with last year with 2018 R2 with what they call Intelligent Edge. And that really is just a little bit better interface with Power BI to try to create some dashboards that you can use inside of GP with a few other optimizations and things. Again, just some additional small enhancements. And going forward, that's really what Microsoft is dedicating themselves to with GP. They're going to continue to try to improve a little bit on that Intelligent Edge, which is the Power BI reporting availability, and some minor enhancements and stuff going forward from there. So as of this point, they haven't announced when the GP Next will come out. Most likely will be at the end of this year, and exactly what that will be named and what that will be going forward. So continuing on that GP roadmap, I've been saying this for a good year and a half since there was some news that came out that GP is dead, GP is going away. There are some blog posts and things being spread around there. And the fact is GP is not dead. Microsoft has confirmed as of now that Dynamics GP 2016 will be supported through 2021. For those of you that are still on GP 2015, that is supported through April of this next year. So April of 2020. So if you are on GP 2015, you definitely want to be considering or talking to us about upgrading that to make sure you're on a supported version after April of 2020. And they've said that GP 2018 will be supported through the beginning of 2023. It is our expectation that when the GP Next version comes out, most likely at the end of this year, that will be pushed out through 2025, but nothing has been published on that. So as of this point, it is our assumption that it will be supported through 2025, but we don't know for sure. And we don't know what may be beyond as of that point either. But Microsoft is continuing to make small enhancements and support Dynamics GP. But the reality is looking at, there's one thing about making small improvements and supporting it. It's another thing that says, really, what is the future for Microsoft in their ERP landscape? And the fact is that it's not Dynamics GP. The roadmap has, if we looked at the same roadmap 2 years ago, it's almost exactly the same as it is now. They just continue to say, well, we'll make small enhancements in that, which they are doing, but they're backing off considerably on their investment in the solution. A big indicator for us, and this has been going on for almost 2 years now, that Microsoft has stopped paying their internal salespeople commissions. So Microsoft isn't incentivizing their people to sell at GP anymore. They're relying completely on their partners to do so. And as of this point, there's very little commitment from Microsoft on the sales side to increase the usage of Dynamics GP. And the fact is, GP, it's a 30-year-old piece of software. The initial version of it was 30 years ago, and they've made lots of great improvements from it. But it is on an old piece of code, the core of it called Dexterity. And there's only so much that Microsoft can do with that. They've tried multiple times to release different versions of their web client so you can access it via the browser. And it is functional in some areas, but for most true financial users, you really cannot make good use of GP with the web client. So Microsoft's even starting to back off on that now because so few customers have been able to make use of that. When it comes to moving to the cloud, GP itself, we'll talk about this a little bit more later. There are some third-party cloud options, but you cannot use from Microsoft itself GP in the cloud. And their team beyond the sales piece that we talked about. When we talk about the just the development and support team at Microsoft, that team has been shrinking. And some of that has been great for Arctic IT because we've hired some wonderful people from Microsoft directly to work for us. We're very glad to have them on board. But that a lot of people on the GP team are moving off to other teams, and they continue to scale that back. And the fact is, when it comes to any marketing type of things that Microsoft is doing, investment in development and enhancements and pushing things forward, they are doing that all in Dynamics 365 right now. That is Microsoft's focus, and that is their path forward. So some people have asked, why this direction? Why did Microsoft choose to go to Dynamics 365? Why didn't they just make GP available in the cloud and do those things? But Microsoft, in looking at the way GP is architectured, it really leaves siloed systems, meaning if you have a CRM system, if you have your operational casino systems and those things, it is very hard to connect those. You leave things very much kind of siloed and on their own, which means that you end up with duplicate data in multiple places, probably in spreadsheets as well as you're trying to do reconciliations and other things in and out of the system, which leads to a lot of manual processes and things being run around because the workflows really don't work very well. So you're handling a lot of approvals and stuff via email and or on pieces of paper, which then gives you very insufficient reporting to see, well, how are we doing operationally as an organization? And from a security and administration perspective, because it's an old piece of software, at its core, there's a lot of concerns about you need to install it on everyone's workstation? Do those users need to be local administrators? You have separate user accounts for GP than the domain itself and inside the database. So there's just a lot to juggle. And the more Microsoft has tried to add to it, like Power BI, workflow, and these other things, it just means working harder and harder to try to tie all these pieces of functionality together. Almost like the Dynamics transformer, where you've got lots and lots of different pieces that you're trying to fit together to make into a unified solution. It just really hasn't worked. So as Microsoft took a look at what do we do for the future, they said we need to kind of shift our goals and really look at the platform as a whole and come up with something new. So that is why their investment in Dynamics GP and the path forward is continuing to dwindle. So assuming no questions have come up, we'll move on to the options that we have now with Dynamics GP. So when it comes to Dynamics GP, I mean, the fact is you can definitely continue to use GP the way you are right now. For most folks, that is using Dynamics GP on-premise, which means that you have GP, you've got it installed on a server there with your database behind the scenes, and you're connecting to it from either a terminal server or with Dynamics GP installed on each individual workstation. It's more that traditional client server on-premise Dynamics GP install. Some of the positives on that is if as an organization you made some recent investments in hardware and infrastructure that you have there, keeping GP on-premise and using that could help to make best use of that infrastructure, that investment that has already been made. And familiar features and processes. If you've been using it for a long time, which a lot of GP customers have, then you know how to use it, you're familiar with it, probably have some folks internally that can help you support it. You've just been making good use of that for a long time. When you compare GP's annual renewals with some modern subscription-based stuff, which we'll talk about in a little bit, that annual software renewal is typically going to be quite a bit lower in some ways than looking at the new model of a subscription-based license. We'll talk about that in depth in a little bit more. And you have your data stored locally. So if you have some concerns or other things, your Dynamics GP data is in a database in your network, completely there. So those are some of the most common reasons why we hear people talking about wanting to stay with Dynamics GP on-premise. Some of the drawbacks of that. It does mean, especially if your hardware or infrastructure or your accounting server or finance server, if you have one dedicated to GP, that means that it's going to frequently need updating. You're going to have to buy new servers. You're going to have to maintain those. So if you are at that point where you're looking at, do we need to buy new servers to maintain our finance system, keeping GP on-premise might be a drawback of that. especially with new versions of GP requiring new versions of SQL quite a bit, because that can get pretty expensive. And while you have the familiar features and processes, you're also then having to deal with a lack of modern automation and updated features. You're continuing to use functions that have been around for a long time and updated to help, but lacking a lot of that automation when it comes to true workflows, web-based access, automated features and functionality that you just can't get with GP. And while you do have some low annual renewals when it comes to the software costs, you also have to then start dealing with major upgrade projects, especially for those of you that have customizations, custom reports, custom integrations, all those things. With every version of GP, those might have to be rewritten and updated and confirmed. And so those projects, when it comes to upgrade, those really stack up and those costs can increase quite a bit. You're also dealing then with a lack of mobile and remote access. So the system in general, you can't use GP on the go, especially via phone or anything like that to approve items and take action on that. But even if you do have some sort of VPN connections available to be able to connect into your network to use GP, it's going to be very slow because a lot of that processing is still happening on your local workstation, and it's transferring all that information across the network, which is most likely encrypted if you're using VPN, but you're still having to then open up connectivity into your network just to be able to allow remote access for your financial system and running reports. And that has its own security. You're still dealing with those same security concerns I mentioned a bit ago with how the software has to be installed, managing multiple user accounts and passwords and everything for different systems, and just some of the way that the system has been architectured. A lot of that security system is still what was in place there 10, 15 or more years ago with Dynamics GP. So that option one is staying with GP on premise. Now we talked about that low annual renewal versus major upgrade processes and the licensing and features. So to help explain that a little bit more, as you might be comparing the value, that ROI or total cost of ownership for keeping your software more that traditional model of on-premise versus migrating to the cloud. And an independent study that was done a few years ago, this is what came out. Over 5 years of an ROI comparison, they said that when you look at an on-premise financial solution, that about 9% of the cost associated with that software, associated with running that application across the board, is related to the software licensing. So that means that 91% of the costs or everything else in regards to the initial implementation and customization, you have to buy all the hardware, all of the IT personnel time that it takes to maintain that, the actual upgrading process of all that and training and those things. But the other ongoing costs to keep things patched, upgraded, rewriting those customizations as we talked about, system downtime to do upgrades, so just that lack of productivity with the system overall, and then maintaining every piece of the network that you need and other parts and pieces just creates an ongoing burden of IT. So that's where that 91% of the total true cost they calculated is coming from stuff beyond the licensing cost of it itself. However, over that same 5 years and looking at a cloud computing system, so Cloud ERP, 68% of the total cost came from the subscription fees. Because everything else was really tied into that. All the upgrades, the maintenance and everything of the networking components to run that is all handled by Microsoft or whoever that cloud provider solution is. That's all there. You're just connecting to it via a website. You still have the training costs, you still have the customization and implementation costs, but over a 5-year span, that gets kind of spread out from that initial upfront to where, so if you're comparing those software costs, you have to factor in that aspect that the cloud computing is just a lot more value for that cost because you don't have the server licensing associated with it. You don't have to buy the server hardware associated with that solution. They're always up to date, so you don't have major upgrade projects. Those upgrades are all the time continuous. Microsoft has what they call the one version for finance and operations to keep your system up to date and you're not having to run massive upgrades. It's just more secure in general when we look at the ability to use multi-factor authentication for connecting into the system. The full encryption back and forth, and the fact that Microsoft's data centers, are secured by the top security experts in the world to help that. Time and time again, studies are showing that that these major cloud solutions are more secure than on-premise solutions. And you have that secure access from anywhere on any device, where you could access most of these solutions with on tablets, on phones, from your laptops and other things when you're on the go, via Office 365 and your email, to be able to keep those processes moving, get the reports and information that you need when you're not sitting at your desk. If you're out in meetings, if you're on the on the casino floor, you got training sessions, or even just taking some time away, but you want to keep a business going back home, the ability to access that from anywhere. Now, this is the always on 99.9%. This is guaranteed by Microsoft Azure applications for Dynamics 365, but most cloud computing solutions, whether it's Dynamics or not, has about a 99.9% guaranteed uptime, which means you no longer have to deal with downtime, missed operations, and time using the software. And you can start embedding in that and taking advantage of things like AI and machine learning. So that idea of where you've got large data sets, you've got Microsoft's or cloud solution providers, cloud computing all their data center power behind what you're doing. They can start offering things like suggestions on forecasts, maybe changes to budgets, recurring entries and those sorts of things, because they've got that machine learning behind the scenes that can be activated for these solutions. But let's say that you understand and you like the idea of moving to the cloud, but you really just want to stick with GP. Migrating to a new solution right now doesn't make sense. There are some options for taking GP, your Dynamics GP environment, to the cloud. And really what that is involved is it's moving your Dynamics GP server from being an on-premise server to a server used by a cloud provider. So with Microsoft Azure is the most commonly used one by us. Ingevity is a third-party GP provider that is very skilled and does a lot of GP hosting. We've used some of their services in the past. There's a number of other cloud providers out there, but it's that idea of you're not using a true cloud multi-tenant solution. You're still running GP as your own environment. It's just you don't have to have that installed on your own servers and maintaining that there. You're using that in a cloud provider. And we have had a number of customers make this move. And part of the reasons for doing so is that idea we talked about earlier, where maybe you need to update your current hardware. You're at that point where you have to decide, do we need to buy new servers and upgrade that? You could switch to doing this, where you're now paying for that that cloud server on a monthly basis, and that's what's called infrastructure as a service, IaaS, and using that rather than buying new servers, right? And then you still maintain those other pros that we talked about. You're still using GP. It is your environment, your code base, your databases, those things. It's just using a cloud terminal server. So now you still have those same processes and familiar features that you're using from GP. It's your same configuration, your same system, just in a cloud server. You still have those low annual Microsoft licensing because you're still paying for the annual renewals as you are now with GP. But you've also now enabled more of a true remote access where you could just log into that cloud environment, that cloud terminal server, to use your GP from anywhere that you are without having to enable remote access into your internal network. Some drawbacks, just flipping that around. If you did make recent investments in hardware and infrastructure and you've got kind of an internal data center sitting there, by moving your GP to the cloud, you might not be taking full use of that investment you've already made in your on-premise infrastructure. You're still dealing with the fact that it's the same GP version, so it's a lack of modern automation and updated features, as we were talking about before. And having your server in the cloud means that you still have to upgrade your GP anytime that you want to. So it doesn't get automatically upgraded by Microsoft or anything like that. You still have those major upgrade projects. And it doesn't give you mobile access. While you can access it via a laptop or something connecting into that terminal server, GP doesn't have mobile phone access and those things to allow you to approve things and process transactions while on the go. So these are two options, again, that you have with continuing to use GP. Just upgrading and maintaining your on-premise environment that you're probably already using, or that idea of moving your GP to the cloud in order to take advantage of remote access and that infrastructure as a service. The third option that we'll be talking about and spending most of our time on today is what Microsoft is really kind of pushing out there right now, is to migrate from Dynamics GP to Microsoft Dynamics 365. If you've had the conversation with me in the past year or more, you've probably heard me talk about Dynamics 365 already quite a bit. But Dynamics 365 is more than just an accounting system. It is a true integrated cloud platform, which means it's unifying those CRM, those ERP finance capabilities, along with other operational systems, all on one platform with modern applications, modern functionality, modern usability to help folks really achieve that digital transformation. You move away from so many of those manual processes, those security concerns, that the insufficient reporting that we were talking about earlier. But Dynamics 365 is the name of the platform, but there are multiple applications on that. That CRM type functionality is that sales and service, Dynamics 365 customer engagement. So those, along with marketing, really increases the ability to interact with your players. You increase that loyalty that you might have from your player loyalty, that engagement that you have with them. Again, all on that same platform. Finance and operations, which we'll be talking about today, that is the newest Dynamics financial system. Then we've got talent for human capital management aspects behind that, and then enterprise retail. So again, if you're using different applications for all these things now, they're not connected, they're difficult to talk to one another, difficult to integrate, duplicate data, insufficient reporting. That Dynamics 365 kind of incorporates all of this into one platform and has very modern integration capabilities to bridge those gaps more easily with other operational systems you're using. And that is all based on that common data model that is behind Dynamics 365 to have those records be shared across those applications. And it is embedded with Office 365 and Power BI for truly being able to take advantage of the latest functions that Microsoft has available. And it's all in the very secure Microsoft Azure cloud. We look at the ERP side, which, if you're thinking about migrating or what's next from GP, these would be the two areas in Dynamics to consider. The finance and operations is that true enterprise level, enterprise class ERP solution. Realistically, it's designed for 50 plus users with complex operations. So it's got full featured the ability to do multi-entity consolidations, real budget planning and reporting across all of that. So we've seen a number of tribes make a decision to look at finance and operations, not only for the tribal government and the casinos, but their other non-gaming operations, to kind of bring everyone into one system to keep that securely separated and segregated as needed, but to allow consolidated reporting for tribal leadership to be able to make decisions and see how things are going in real time across all the entities. Full supply chain procurement, inventory, warehouse management for both government operations and for-profit and casino operations, project management, and a whole lot more. And it is truly great for those large casinos and tribes that are trying to manage the entire enterprise on one ERP. Business Central is the Dynamics 365 ERP version for more of that small to medium-sized business. It has a lot of similar functionality to Dynamics NAV. And so with that, it's got optimized financials. It still handles inventory and distributions very well and great analytics, but it is ideal more for smaller tribal casinos that are on their own, not part of managing across the entire enterprise, or for smaller economic development corporations. So with Dynamics 365, again, we've got core, very solid financial management. But then if you compare some of these things to what we had in Dynamics GP, it's got a full-blown project management functionality that's much easier to use and set up than anything we've ever had with GP. The inventory and warehouse management as well. In GP, you've got 20 different screens to set up a new item, it feels like. A lot of that has been very much enhanced and the functionality made available and much more user-friendly inside of Dynamics 365. Very strong reporting and analytics, really based on Power BI, but with also very similar financial reporting tools for, similar to like an FRX or management reporter for designing those financial reports. So it's a very easy transition to make. The customer and player management for truly engaging with your players, the marketing aspect coming out from there as it ties in with other applications of Dynamics 365. And being able to bring in a lot of the AR information in a centralized place. The procurement side in handling where you're buying, selling, pick, pack, and ship, if you will, that full supply chain management for especially some of the other economic development companies that we've seen some tribes recently invest in, whether it's manufacturing, other areas, you could still manage all of that on Dynamics 365. And we talked about the lack of mobile access with GP, really, no matter what you do. Well, Dynamics 365 has apps available for Android and Apple. They work on tablets, they work on your phones, and it is also a browser agnostic solution, which means that you could be in Safari and accessing the full web version of Dynamics 365. And it's designed to have very nice touchscreen enabled features. So even if you're like myself, I've got a touchscreen laptop that makes it easy to use when I'm on the go, to be able to access these things through these workspaces, to make getting the information, improving transactions, and even entering in new transactions while on the go, new quotes, POs, requests, things like that, all from a device on the go. And we talked about the artificial intelligence or machine learning capabilities, the ability to have sales forecasts and other things, be able to update your suggested inventory levels, being able to gather information and look at historicals to say, look, if this trend continues, you're going to run out of items if you just continue to purchase them based on your current par levels. Especially if you have department managers, which through the system can submit forecasts for holidays or other areas to make sure that they've got the stock that they need, maybe for their food and beverage inventory, that sort of thing. You can use the budgets, the forecasts, and the machine learning all kind of rolled together to really help guide your employees to those optimal outcomes. And being on the Office 365 platform, the ability to see and interact with your information from inside of Outlook, not even having to switch back and forth to different systems, is just showing that not only with Outlook and Excel and all these areas, but it is truly an embedded piece of Dynamics 365 because it uses that same Office 365 user, allowing you to use your Office and ERP system all at the same time. And going beyond that, you still have the full power of the Microsoft stack, giving you more functionality behind the scenes. So some of that, like we talked about, is that Office 365 integrated and interfaced. The ability to have an Excel spreadsheet that is fully interactive, both from and to Dynamics 365 to get the latest information, but to also make quick changes and publish them back up into the system without having to run an integration, and still maintaining that full audit trail and following all the business rules associated with that. Truly embedded with Power BI to give you great visuals, great dashboards and everything based on the information in your ERP solution. You're not having to switch to another dashboard solution. Those are embedded right inside of Dynamics 365. And you can use other pieces of that Office 365 platform of Microsoft Flow and Power Apps to enable workflows and other pieces outside of the system. So you can start an approval request or workflows right from inside of Outlook and have that routed through and approved, and once approved, create the transaction inside the system. You have a lot of ways to interact throughout the Microsoft platform without even having to be inside the accounting system. But where enhancements or extensions are needed, there is an app store that has a number of things available that you can install in a trial mode and check them out in a much more modern way than you ever were able to with Dynamics GP. And if you have some existing ISVs that you really like, maybe for some web procurement type things or other sorts of budgeting and reporting, even though some of that functionality you could do out of the box with Dynamics 365, some of those core existing ISVs that maybe you really like with Dynamics GP, a lot of those are fully compatible with GP, so you wouldn't have to switch and migrate off of those systems if you chose to go with Dynamics 365. And the last piece with Dynamics 365 that I'll mention is the enhanced HR components. We've had other people ask us about, we see HR functionality in GP, but we've never made use of it. And that's because it really requires the HR staff to do all the data entry because it's just not a modern platform. Well, with Dynamics 365 for Talent being an online, truly modern system that enables employee self-service, manager self-service, attracting and onboarding this information, so you can have the folks that you're recruiting fill out that paperwork and onboard them and have that all right there in your HR system without having to manually enter all that yourself. So to really enhance and give you a modern platform all within Dynamics 365 for your human resource system. But now that we've talked about the three options of staying with Dynamics GP on premise, taking your Dynamics GP to a cloud environment, or looking at Dynamics 365, just some additional things to consider overall. I want to again just highlight, as you're thinking about a cloud solution, again, that you can't just compare the license fees from one to the other, regardless of the cloud solution you're using, because there's so much that goes into maintaining an on-premise solution that isn't part of the actual cost that you pay to Microsoft for your GP licenses, plus all of the additional functionality and modern interfaces that you gain by moving to the cloud. But we know that Dynamics 365 is not the only cloud options that are out there. There's quite a few of them, and you'll see marketing materials for a lot of those, or maybe even have received calls from those organizations. And the fact is, a lot of them, they started from the ground up. They were built just for the cloud, and a lot of that, they know that in that, if they make it look pretty, a lot of people will be interested. And so a lot of those cloud solutions really make great first impressions, but they don't have that depth. They don't have the foundation of the platform and everything behind it, the years of functionality like Microsoft has from GP and their other versions, that they have taken the best of that functionality into Dynamics 365. And so when you take a look deeper at a lot of these other cloud solutions that are out there, you really need to say, how is that foundation? Where does that take us? Where does that leave us? Even if it looks pretty to begin with, a nice dashboard when I first log in, what does the platform as a whole give you? If you're on your own with just another isolated accounting system with a little bit of integration capabilities, what about your CRM? What about your casino floor operational systems? How are you connecting and reporting on that? And you're still left with a very isolated system. You might be able to export to Excel like most accounting systems can now, but what else can you do? Do you have true Excel and Office 365 and email compatibility and an interface with the solutions? And almost all the time not. With security, now you're managing another type of security environment off of the Office 365 and Azure Active Directory that you'd be using for your other applications. Now you're managing multiple connections, multiple users. Do they even offer multi-factor authentication to keep that secure? And some of the reasons why those dashboards can be so easy to set up when you first log into these new systems is because they have very little flexibility in how your chart of accounts is arranged. They might lock in, these are the dimensions that you have to use, so you have to fit them to your business process, which means that some of the dashboards work right away because they've told you exactly what your chart of accounts has to look like, but that gives you no flexibility to adapt to changing business needs. And if you need to add custom dimensions, they start charging you more and more, and you're limited to what you can do with those. Again, how do you connect to other data sources, and how deep do those visualizations and reports truly go? Again, with a lot of that just being what's on the forefront and not truly giving you the depth of a true enterprise class financial system behind the scenes. So all that being said, when you're looking at other solutions out there, other cloud options, make sure you're looking at some homework and how secure of how stable of an organization is it? How long has a platform been around? And what other types of organizations are making use of it? And again, we've talked about ROI a few times, and when taking a look at that overall ERP cost associated, the total cost of ownership, in the handouts, there's a handout session in the webinar. One of those handouts is about an independent study that was done that took a look at the ROI of Dynamics 365, and it did show that on average that there's almost a $17 return on investment for every dollar spent on Dynamics 365. And so read that independent analysis if you have time to really see how they came up with that. See, there truly is value in the Dynamics 365 platform. And for those of you that have attended other pieces of our casino operations webinar series, we thank you for the time that you've spent with us. This is the last piece of that. We love your feedback of other webinars and other information that you'd like to see, so we can continue to do things like this to keep you educated and help make technology simple for you. Well, thank you all again for joining us today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day and a happy weekend. We look forward to touching base sooner on the future of Dynamics GP and how we can help your organization grow.